So on the 18th of June 2019, the EU Expert Group for Sustainable Finance, TEG, published a proposal for a European definition of environmentally sustainable activities. This proposal is a taxonomy that is best compared to a green encyclopedia for financial market participants. An encyclopedia that provides guidance to investors that are looking to finance the transition to an economy in line with the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement. The TEG's proposal is a major step towards a European definition of sustainable economic activities, and it has the potential to be a real game changer in the longer term through more transparency, lower transition costs, and better dialogue between investors and investees. Brenda is part of the technical expert group and is also senior advisor responsible investment at PGGM. Before PGGM, Brenda was a strategic advisor for the Dutch Finance Ministry and the president of the Eurogroup. And at TEG, Brenda got to combine her European legislation and political experience with her experience at PGGM in ESG, integration, and impact investing. And I think part of that cocktail of qualifications probably allows her to be one of the most experts in the investment fields for this. So the EU's Sustainable Finance Package is one of the most ambitious legislative plans. And I believe the EU Taxonomy for Climate is 4 reports. But what's the actual objective?
Well, thank you, Nikki, first of all, for... this is very close. Can someone look at it? Because you're going to hear me breathe throughout the session, I think. Is it better now? Yeah, this is better, right? Okay, good. Thank you, Nikki, for introducing me, and Sophie and Phoenix for having me. So the taxonomy is just a little part of the complete action plan. As TAG, we looked at 4 different work streams. So taxonomy is one. There's an advice on green bonds. There is a report on how to create low carbon benchmarks as opposed to the standard benchmarks. Think about MSCI World or FTSE World. And the 4th one is actually on non-financial disclosures by companies. Now, for me, taxonomy is really the basis of all of this, and it's also the basis of the broader action plan of the European Commission that was published last year. It's 10 actions with a focus on mobilizing capital towards making the European economy in the first place more sustainable. And this, again, is part of an even broader strategy of actually making the EU economy more sustainable. So it's very important, if you look at taxonomy, it's really a small part into a really broad strategy to make the economy more sustainable, and an action plan that is focused specifically on making the financial sector more sustainable. And so the objective of taxonomy is, as you said, it's an encyclopedia. So we're trying to create transparency. Because probably if I'm going to ask you all, like, what is sustainable investment or what is an environmentally sustainable investment, well, we can put it to a test if you want. Like, who thinks gas should be into a sustainable investment encyclopedia? Nobody? Oh, that's quite a surprise. Maybe nuclear energy? This is a French room. See, there's a big debate. So it's actually quite hard to agree on what is truly sustainable and what's not. And creating a common definition can help with that and can actually move us in the same direction. That's the first. The second one is actually, this is going to be a basis for labels. And as we've seen with the food industry, eco-labels, bio-labels, they work. Even if you're in Italy or Netherlands, it doesn't matter. You can buy biological food and you know it adheres to the same standards in the whole of the European Union. That's good for consumers, right? We give them a choice and they know it's a good green fund. It's also good for investors because if you're now marketing a fund in the European Union, you are likely to apply for about 27 different eco-labels for your fund. That cost should be reduced by using taxonomy as a basis for labels.
So just to be clear, I mean, these activities are for companies, governments, financial institutions, but can we talk a little bit specifically for investors? How will it affect them? I mean...
So it's probably good to start off, like, taxonomy in its current form, even though it will be legislation, is not obligatory for every investor. It's a guidance. It's an encyclopedia. You're free to use it or not, unless you're an investor marketing a green fund. So if you have, I don't know, a Paris-aligned fund, a green revenue fund, a climate positive fund, you will have to show, and that is obligatory, how far that aligns with the EU taxonomy. That's the only obligation in the current proposed legislation. The rest is voluntary.
And that's from now? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, the legislation is still under negotiations, not yet there, but that is the proposal.
Okay, and so the end game is to make all sustainable investing come under this as a rule, or is it just going to be for the green funds?
It's just environmentally sustainable at the moment. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, we touched on this slightly in the previous panel. Actually, we touched on it a lot in the previous panel. There was a survey of global pension assets, and there's something like $40 trillion, and we're looking for an amount to sort of achieve these goals by 2030. So what's still standing in the way? So we've got the beginnings of the taxonomy, we've got all the institutions sort of supporting us. What's going to stop this or hinder the process?
Yeah, so I think it's good. Indeed, there's the Commission calculated, I think the European Commission, a financing gap between 180 and 280 billion per year to reach the Paris climate goals by 2030. It seems like a lot of money, but as you said, there is also a lot of money in the market already, so it might be a small part. And I think we need to be humble as investors that, you know, the thing we can do is give money to the companies that do good, but we can't decide what they do. We can speak to them, we can engage with them, but we can't tell them you have to make a different business case. And so this action plan and taxonomy is focused on what we can do as investors in this market. But there's a lot standing in the way to change the economy. I mean, we will need to work together with companies, with governments, with NGOs to actually change the economy. So I think that is very important to keep in mind, and definitely more is needed. And something that we've been advocating for is the CO2 pricing, for example, or tax advantages for more sustainable business models to actually increase the number of projects and companies that we can invest in with a positive impact.
All right, we've got a couple more minutes. So
Yes.
we were talking about the investors. What are companies? What can they do? I mean, how can they use these taxonomies in a different? Is it a different way, or is it exactly the same way?
Well, I think companies will be affected by it indirectly, in the sense that it's likely that investors will go and ask them for the data that are in taxonomy. So there is data on GHG emissions, for example. We're already asking that, but hopefully it will be more standardized. What I'm hoping as well is what it will do for companies is that we would actually, as investors, we can have a dialogue with them on what is the trajectory that you can follow towards 2030. And one of the things I think that is different in this taxonomy than many taxonomies that we use as investors is that it also includes the really polluting sectors. So we have looked at steel companies, we've looked at cement companies, and we've actually set out trajectories based on IEA and IPCC scenarios on what should be the GHG emissions per produced ton of steel, for example. And details like that actually enable us to speak to companies and look at the longer horizon. And I think that that can be very useful and will be also needed in this way that we have to go together.
Earlier today, we had an interesting session where the sort of notion that everybody had to divest out of the carbon stocks. Mm-hmm. That's not the only way. There are other ways, and also engaging with the companies. So is this the toolkit to help people engage across other
I wouldn't say it's the toolkit. It's definitely one of the tools that is in the toolkits. Yeah.
When and what are the next steps?
Yeah, so our mandate of the tag runs to the end of the year.
Okay.
So still 3 months to go. And I think we're not going to finish all of it because it's been a lot of work. What we will focus on is really looking at the usability, because I don't know how many people have actually looked at the report or the summary. It's only 25 pages. It's quite readable.
That's pretty good.
That's good, yeah. And so if you look at the tables in the back and you see the descriptions of all of the activities, you might get a bit scared because it's quite a lot of data we ask, and much of the data is not yet available. So one of our key challenges for the coming half year is how we're going to make that even more simple and readable. So we're hoping, like my hope, and that's shared by some of my tech colleagues as well, that we will have a website, you will go there, you say, I'm going to invest in this activity, and you'll see this is what it asks from you, and in your classification system, this is NICs, this is GIGs, this is NAYs, so you'll have all the codes. So that is what we're hoping to work to. We have 3 months to do that, so I hope we'll at least set the first steps towards something that is so usable for investors.
So there will be a sort of online portal for people to check whether their
exactly.
what their investments are about.
Wikipedia for green investments or something.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think what we've got here is the beginnings of a Wikipedia for climate change-related investing. Transparency is definitely one of the things that will come out of it. A chance for investors to engage with the companies and find a way of having a voice rather than just blanket divestment. Is that something that will come through?
I think maybe, to summarize it, I think this is a tool for investors that are willing to make a positive change. And we're trying to make it as useful as possible for them. And then if you're such an investor, it can do two things. It kind of reduces your transactional cost because you won't have to judge on gas or on cement. You will just, you can look at taxonomy and see whether it's in or not, under which conditions. That's one. The other one is it takes a bit away the reputational risk of judging certain activities because someone else has done that for you and you know it's a group that is actually investors, companies, politicians, policymakers, NGOs. So it's a trusted, it's a broad common consensus. That doesn't sound well. It's a broad consensus that is the right thing to do. So hopefully it gives you some comfort if you're, an investor wanting to make an environmental change.
I just want to take one more question. Yes.
It's one of the top 10 sectors. I had a similar comment to Seb through looking at it, that actually it doesn't include the enablers, and it's only at the moment climate mitigation and adaptation. And the worry is, will people actually know how to interpret the percentage taxonomy compliant? Because really it looks at a certain thing and does it well, is very structured and does provide that clarity, but there's actually a lot that's missing. Yeah. And so you do need a very educated audience, and the worry is that it will put it down to a number, that, well, this number's bigger than this, so this is better. And how do you communicate that side of it?
Yeah, I see this, what we publish, I actually see it as a minimum viable product. So this is like a prototype of how the eventual taxonomy should look like. And that was really the maximum we could do in the amount of time that we got. So yes, there are definitely limitations, and by December we will be done, but there will be a permanent platform following our group, and the idea is that they will indeed work out all of the sectors of the economy and all of the different objectives. So there's definitely like another 1-2 years of work that goes into defining the other activities. Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Please join me in thanking Brenda for this fascinating discussion. Thank you so much.